What does your job involve?
What does my job involve? Wow, okay. I freelance for a really long time, so I come from a journalistic background. I began at Days Confused magazine, and I still have a relationship with the magazine now as a visual arts editor. I kind of fell into curating 8-9 years ago when I curated an exhibition based on my postcard collection. I've been collecting art postcards since I was 9 years old. So my job as a curator now, I freelance. I put together a collection for a group of members clubs internationally called Soho House. I do exhibitions around the world, such as Evaporate, where we are now. Usually, often have been involving ideas around technology and emerging artists. And I've written 5 books. So I come very much from like a writing background. And I think for me, the way I approach exhibitions is very similar to the way I would approach writing an article.
Is this something you've always wanted to do?
What did I always want to do? When I was 5, I wanted to be a concert pianist. And then I thought I wanted to be a film director when I was about 12. I used to say the one thing I didn't want to be was a journalist, and then I became one. I think I kept saying, I don't want to be a journalist, because I knew loads when I was about 16, and they were really annoying. I never thought I'd be a curator, but I did history of art at university. I love the subject. I love looking at things. I think art is the best thing on earth. So the idea that I get to hang around with artists and put on exhibitions is brilliant, but it's totally not what I expected to be doing at all. I didn't do a course on it. I literally just thought, I want to put on exhibitions, and started doing it.
Is it glamorous being a curator?
Well, the logistical side of it isn't, obviously. You're like installing shows, though usually I'm very dependent on good installers or people with technical capabilities, because I keep doing shows with like AV and electronics in them, and I have absolutely no skills at this. I also am not very good at drilling things either. I'm a bit of a klutz. But there are glamorous aspects to being a curator. Going to the Venice Biennale during its opening and going to amazing parties and drinking Prosecco in Renaissance heaven is pretty glamorous sometimes. You get good, it's got a good social life attached to it, I'll put it that way.
Can you tell us please, can you tell us what the show is like?
The show we're seeing now?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Evaporate is basically about the relationship between rave and house music in the late 80s, early 90s, and how it's influenced a whole wave of artists since. And I think this is very much sort of a representation of how people first see ideas of dissent and politics and DIY creativity came out of that period in time for this current generation. I find that really fascinating. So it's got a very noisy show with lots of colours and movement and music references and technological ones.
How did you find the artists?
I look at art every day. I'm kind of obsessed with looking at art. It's really funny. I make scrapbooks, like 3-dimensional scrapbooks, and I cut things out and put things in it. So sometimes if I see an artist I like, I'll put them in there and come back to it ages later. I meet a lot of artists that I know socially from being out and about. I go to exhibitions every week, sometimes every day. So you kind of see connections when you're regularly going to exhibitions. Like there's tons of shows around the world and you're a bit like, or even if you're just looking online and you start making visual connections between them. So I think that's kind of how it grew, quite naturally.
Why should people come see Evaporate?
Because it's fun. Because I think it would be a really fun exhibition. And maybe my whole point about doing exhibitions full stop, maybe my whole about writing full stop is I don't think art should be for just like a small group of people coming from like a really intellectual background. I actually think art should be for everyone, and everyone can be excited by it. So I really love doing shows that are that like accessible and open and making references to wider pop culture. I think that's important.
How did the show come to Sheffield?
Laura, who was the curator, who's currently on maternity leave, had been in New York 2 years ago, and she had heard about my exhibition in this warehouse in a crazy back street in Bushwick in Brooklyn. And she went down to it, but she didn't make it inside, but everyone apparently had been talking about my show, which is lovely, because I didn't know that at all. And she got in touch with me and basically said, will you do a version of it here? And I think this is kind of the better version. I'd like to think that was like the warm-up for the final.
With it being a group show, how challenging has it been to fit everything in and make sure all the pieces went together?
Well, it's always so difficult when you're dealing, especially with all the sound pieces, because you want to feel like each room has like one sound. And I wanted some clash, but if there's too much clash, you don't really get to experience anything. I mean, I'm very aware with Adam Faramawi's piece is next to Fatima Al-Qadiri's, and they're both sound-related elements in them, and I hope that works in situ. But sometimes one film will stop and you'll hear the things in the other, and vice versa. There's like spaces where you get to hear things. But yeah, it's always like a really interesting thing when you look at a room and try to work out how you put things together and what makes sense. It's really kind of gut feeling.
Has it been difficult handling the different priorities and ego of the artists involved?
Sometimes that's difficult. Some people get really precious about what you do. I mean, I also think a lot of curators make it about them. Like, this is me, blah, blah. I don't think that's really what it's about. I think it's all about making the artists happy and giving them opportunities, because you want them to feel pleased for being in your exhibition, because everyone else can feel that. And if you can get a really bad reputation if you don't keep the artists happy. But most of the time, like, I don't know, maybe I'm really good at finding good artists without egos. Some ego.
So, can you recap on the details of the show itself?
Okay, yeah, there's works that are full of abstract animation-based elements and graphic elements, which I think reference raves and early computer graphics from that whole period in time. There are some Smiley-related things, like Jeremy Della's thing. There are cassette tapes painted gold. There are lots of different approaches to video and the influence of technology. It's quite a sort of varied thing, but largely moving image, some sculptural with video embedded into it, and then actually very few simple based objects.
And what sort of exhibitions could this lead to?
Well, for me, I mean, it's really natural because it came out of other exhibitions that I've done. So I did one called The New Psychedelica. I did another one, my exhibition on the relationship between art and music. I did called Syncopation in Berlin. I did another show that was all UV, where everything glowed. So the Jeremy Della was originally, I did a version of it in that show. So it's, you always, as a curator, you definitely see relationships. Almost the way like you're answering your own questions as you make them, and then you kind of, it leads to other things, but then also you kind of want to move in a different direction. At some point, I might not want to work with technology and the internet anymore. I read an amazing book, I recommend it to everyone, called 24/7 by Jonathan Crary, which is making me feel a bit weird about my entire relationship with phones and the internet. So we'll see. It's okay. All good?
Everyone feel happy? Directors? How do you feel? Is there anything else that you need to ask?